want to talk about the confounding, strange, puzzling, and always fascinating book of Daniel. One of the most compelling books in the Old Testament, and one that was very important for Jesus and the first Christians. In fact, recent scholarship has shown that a lot of first Christians read Jesus consistently through the lens of the book of Daniel. So it's very important for us today to understand the book better. It's often described as an example of apocalyptic literature. And so people think, oh, it's about the end of the world. Well, yes and no. Apocalypsis means literally taking the veil away, the columna. That's why when they translated apocalypsis into Latin, they got revelatio, taking the velum or the veil away. So apocalyptic literature unveils something. It shows you something new. The book of Daniel is well known for its narrative. So think of Daniel in the lion's den. Think of the story of the three young men thrown into the furnace. Think of the handwriting on the wall. Think of the story of the rape of Susanna, or Bel and the Dragon at the end of the book of Daniel, which is often recognized as the first detective story in Western literature. So Daniel's famous for its narratives, and it's a good place for people to begin, for that reason. But it's also very well known for its visions and dreams and prophecies. Because Daniel is a bit like Joseph in the book of Genesis. He's a interpreter of dreams. And it's this visionary quality of Daniel that sort of haunted Israel up until the time of Jesus and still haunts us today. Well, the first one I want to draw attention to is Daniel's interpretation of a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. Mind you, the setting for Daniel is the Babylonian captivity, when the Israelites have been taken away to Babylon. Daniel, along with a few of his friends, is one of these very handsome and clever young men that the king took into his court to train in the literature of his own people, etc. So they know about Daniel. They know how clever he is and how he's known as a dream interpreter. Well, the king's had this dream that troubles him, and none of his enchanters or dream interpreters can understand it. So he calls for Daniel, and Daniel right away understands the dream. Well, what is the dream? What I like about the description, it's typical of a dream. It's a little weird, and it's not consecutive in its thinking the way dreams are. Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a great statue. And the statue is made of different substances. So the head is made of gold, the shoulders and chest are made of silver, I think the belly and thighs of brass, and then the feet are of clay. In fact, our expression clay feet comes from that dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, then as the dream continues, it says that a rock not hewn by human hands, so somehow mysteriously by God's hand, this great rock is hewn from a mountain, and the rock comes and shatters the statue. So what does it mean? Daniel says, I know what it means. It means there are 4 successive kingdoms, beginning with Nebuchadnezzar, the gold, and then a series of kingdoms will succeed his. And then they will finally all be destroyed and succeeded by a definitive kingdom, not made by human hands. So not a human arrangement, but something of God. Okay. A little bit later in the book, Daniel himself has a dream. And the dream is of 4 great beasts arising out of the sea. And I could go into all the details of the way they're described. It's fascinating. It influenced the book of Revelation strongly. But 4 beasts come out of the sea, each one powerful. But they're finally succeeded by the Ancient of Days. So the God of Israel assumes his throne. And then all kinds of people come and worship. And then it says, as the visions of the night continued, he saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. He comes to the one on the throne, and then to him is given dominion, and all the nations worship him. So it's something very similar. You've got 4 worldly kingdoms, each succeeding the other, and they are finally all destroyed until finally comes this definitive kingdom of God. So the Ancient of Days, and then one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. Okay. Now, when will all this take place? Well, we also hear from the book of Daniel, because Daniel, like a lot of ancient Israelites, had received the revelation from Jeremiah that the restoration of Israel would happen 70 years after the Babylonian captivity. Well, this time has come and gone, and a lot of Israelites begin to wonder, does this revelation still make sense? To Daniel comes the angel Gabriel. Now, mind you, Christians are right away, their attention is raised because Gabriel comes back later in the story. But Gabriel tells him, oh no, what that means is 70 weeks of years. That means 70 times 7, or 490 years. Okay, now you say this all sounds so ancient, so obscure. How would it have to do with us? Well, think about how someone now in the first century would read the situation. A pious Jew reading his own scriptures would say, well, the messianic time should come after 4 kingdoms have come and gone. Well, what had happened now by the first century? They'd seen Babylon, they'd seen Persia, they'd seen Greece, and now they see Rome, the 4th kingdom. More to it, if Daniel is right, it'll happen 490 or like around 500 years after the Babylonian captivity. That's precisely now the first century. Can you see why messianic expectation was especially high and intense precisely at the time of Jesus? Because the 4th kingdom, Rome, people thought, well, maybe that's about to collapse. And it's been about 500 years. So we're expecting one like a son of man to come and to establish the definitive kingdom. Well, out of the hills of Galilee comes this young, charismatic rabbi. What's he preaching? The kingdom of God. Now, we naturally spiritualize that language, or we domesticate it. But you're a first century Jew who's been reading the book of Daniel, and you're expecting a kingdom of God to come. And that's exactly what this man is preaching. And now with his miracles and with his healings and his powerful preaching, and they're saying, this is what's happening. More to it. At the very climax of his life, Jesus stands before the Sanhedrin. And they ask him bluntly, are you the Messiah? What does he say? I am. And you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. What's he citing? But precisely Daniel chapter 7. He's claiming Daniel as the prophetic anticipation of his own life and ministry. I indeed am the one who's coming to establish a definitive kingdom. Which is why when he's crucified and over the cross, Pontius Pilate puts the sign, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. He indeed is speaking the deepest truth. Jesus is this long-awaited king who will establish a kingdom not made by human hands, but made by God himself. What is it? Well, in a way, it's Jesus himself, but then extended. It's that mystical body of the church which participates in the very being of Jesus. The church is this kingdom not made by human hands, which succeeds and endures even as all the kingdoms of the world come and go. See, and that's why the book of Daniel, in all of its ancient strangeness, is entirely relevant to our time. Where should we put our trust? What should we rely upon? Not on any of the passing kingdoms of the world, but on this great kingdom of God, the kingdom established by Jesus the King, his mystical body, the church.